Hello and welcome back to Two and a Half Philosophers. Today, the episode is actually on the waves of doubt, I think, and a bit more. I'll leave Fraser to explain that for you.
Hi guys, today's episode is on Descartes and the waves of doubt. So to begin, we'll talk a bit about who is Mr. René Descartes. Descartes is a polymath. A polymath is someone who's knowledgeable in many different disciplines, so philosophy, science, and maths, which is what Descartes is.
He's a very clever man.
It's true. He was practicing around the start of the 17th century even.
Yikes.
Yikes. But basically, people hail him as the father of epistemology, maybe of metaphysics, depending on how you sort of take his philosophy, but pretty influential philosopher. So the main thing we're talking about from him today is his three waves of doubt. So Descartes writes a book called Meditations on First Philosophy, and basically it's made up of, I think it's 6 or 7 meditations, and the idea is sort of 6. He just brings you through his thought process effectively, about what he can prove as real. So there's 2 different groups he's trying to sort of debate, or I guess write against, which are who are they? Tell me.
I believe it was the skeptics and Catholics.
Yeah, so basically he's writing here to 2 different groups, and he's trying to basically prove the existence of the external world. So the Catholics obviously come from a Christian worldview, so they believe in a God, and similarly to what Descartes himself believes, is that basically God made the world for us, and because he's all loving and all good, he wouldn't deceive us. So because we feel like the world exists, therefore it must exist.
We'll touch on this a bit later when we get to the third wave of doubt and the evil demon.
Sure. Okay. And then we'll try and explain the skeptic position.
Well, the skeptic position believes that nothing can be known for absolute certainty, which is why they're skeptics. They believe that not all our senses can be trusted, because it's always possible that we could be wrong, could be fallible about our own experiences and our lives. So they choose to reject everything. And what Descartes says is no, we shouldn't do that. There must be some things which we can know for certain, which is how we get to his waves of doubt, which we're going to talk about today. And brings him to the first wave of doubt, which Fraser can explain the first wave of doubt.
Okay, so the first wave of doubt is he begins to doubt his senses. So he thinks, okay, are there times in my life that my senses have been deceived? So he says, I don't know, when I've looked out of my window, and seen like a castle, okay, maybe it's far on the horizon, and it looks almost square from how I'm seeing it, okay, like I'm just seeing the rigid edges, so it looks a pretty square castle. But in reality, when he's close up to it, he actually sees that it's curved, and it's like a tower. So he says, okay, my senses seem to tell me that this castle is square, but in fact, it's circular. So he decides, through other examples, but mainly this one, actually he can doubt his senses, and his methodology is that if he can doubt any part of something, he just chooses to disregard it wholesale. So he says, because in this one example, amongst others obviously, but in this example, his senses seem to deceive him, he takes it so that he can't trust his senses at all. What's your thoughts on that, Olav?
Okay, so first of all, he's just completely disregarded senses over this castle that he still saw as a castle in the first place. So the castle is actually still there. The difference was straight-edged and rounded parts. So in the end, he was basically right. Like, the core knowledge he retrieves from seeing the castle doesn't really change, with it being straight or
Oh.
curved.
So most of the knowledge is still true. When he sees the square castle, he is still seeing a castle, even if it's square or circular. But because he's trying to prove the skeptics wrong, and they have a very high, standard of evidence for a belief, he says that if I even have like a hint that this might be able to be wrong, he just disregards it completely wholesale. So it's sort of just a way to defend against any attack by the skeptics when they say, well, actually you weren't thorough enough in your disregarding of senses. He just says, you know what, let's just remove the senses completely.
But then, okay, first one, you remove the senses completely. Then, what can you trust in the first place?
Well, obviously that's a pretty big issue. It seems to be that every single thing that we experience in life has to be first, passed through the senses. Right? We either like see things or hear them or smell them. We can't really peek things as opposed to the senses, and that's true with like experiencing things. But philosophers make a distinction between like experiential phenomena, so like me seeing something or touching it, and then purely reasoning phenomena. So in philosophy, it's called a posteriori, is when you have things through experience, and then a priori is knowledge through reason alone. So, for example, we can say that we know, let's say that I have a body, by just looking at it I say, oh, I have hands, I have arms, I have legs, therefore I have a body. But Descartes, as we've said, he wants to disregard his senses, so he actually rejects this sort of knowledge. But you can still have a priori knowledge. So let's say we take in maths that 2 plus 3 is equal to 5. And Descartes makes a claim that we can actually believe that's true without having ever experienced 2 or 3 or addition, that we can just merely reason that 2 plus 3 is equal to 5.
What does he mean by experienced 2, 3, or addition in the first place? Because experiencing it purely is just doing it.
An amount of something like 2 apples and 3 apples, you'd be experiencing 2 apples and 3 apples. You put them together, you have 5 apples now. And what Descartes wants is he wants to get to a kind of knowledge that you can know without ever having to experience the 2 apples or 3 apples. So he wants to get rid of all of his senses that could be wrong under circumstances. He wants to get rid of all of that and wants to know what he can be sure of with absolute certainty, what he can know for sure and not be wrong.
Yeah, but then doesn't that make, like, because the apples or the addition in the first place is going through his senses, so it would also mean that it should be disregarded in a way, at least.
I mean,
the concept of apples could be disregarded, but the idea of numbers of 1, 2, 3, you don't need apples. You just need to know amounts of things.
I think that's probably a valid concern where you come from there, that because we're humans, like by definition, everything we see, like, comes from experience. Even maths. The first people to do maths did it because they saw, 2 spears and 3 spears, and they're like, oh, we have 5 spears now. But philosophers tend to think, okay, if we think about this hypothetically, let's say no people lived. Okay, so there's never been any humans. If there was 3 moons and 2 moons, is there still 5 moons? There's no people to experience the moons, but would it make sense to say, well, if Jupiter has 2 moons and Earth has 3 moons, in total they have 5 moons?
And at that point, it just matters what you're counting. It's not a matter of addition at that point. I think just because there's 5 moons in this vicinity of Jupiter and Earth, it makes there be 5 moons instead of there be 2 moons, 3 moons. If you counted Earth and Jupiter separately, then you would probably have to do addition, but addition is just counting in a sense. So,
but even without there being people, to experience the moons or the addition, we can. It seems to make sense that we can still say that we can do addition without any people being there, right? If we have 2 moons for Jupiter and 3 for Earth, it still makes sense to have 5 without people there. So maybe you disagree with the basis that it's all built on, but at least at the time, and still today, people don't really doubt that mathematical truths can exist without humans.
I mean, you can think of it like Isaac Newton's laws of gravity. Before he discovered them and put all his numbers on them, they still worked. They were still, his great laws of mathematics. He just had to experience them and figure them out before he could actually use them. But they were always still like true.
Yeah, for that actually, I saw something on this because he just maps a part of like gravity and maps a part of matter and things like that, because there are numbers like you could put negative numbers into some mathematical theorems for like gravity and things like that, which would represent negative mass, and it would all calculate to be fine. Some people use this as like reasoning that there is negative matter, antimatter, and all of that, but some scientists still say there isn't, which makes it that those two things kind of like don't, even if it's true, one of them, the other part of it cannot be true. So mapping it out mathematically would not be correct all the time.
I mean, I think we've got a bit sidetracked
Sorry.
Descartes'
Just on
meditations.
that one, at the end of the day, Newton made all his theories of gravity and whatever with the knowledge that there was positive mass and gravity and not with negative. So you can only really take his theory and apply it as far as he knew it could be applied, right? He didn't know that there would be negative mass, so he didn't really take that into account when making his laws. But aside from that, next wave of doubt is the second one, which is, so he first doubts that his senses can be true, that they're veridical perception, and then he then moves on to doubting maybe that he's instead dreaming. So he says that I've dreamed before, and in those dreams my experience has felt like reality. So maybe I was dreaming that, I don't know, I was playing tennis, and in the moment at least I felt like I was playing tennis. And he says, well, who's to say right now I'm not dreaming, and rather than me dreaming that I'm playing tennis, I'm dreaming that I'm doing philosophy and writing a book. So maybe not only I can't doubt my senses, but I can't even doubt that I'm awake and what's happening to me is real.
No, but in dreams you'll have to have had a dream where you're like, oh wait, this is a dream, but then that causes you to wake up, or you stay in the dream knowing that it's completely not real. For reality, I don't know if he's suggesting that reality is like is similar to a dream, and that maybe even like death is you realizing it's a dream in a weird sense. But
well, he's not really making truth claims about what existence is like. He's not saying that when we die we'll wake up, or that he's not actually saying that anything is real or not. He's just saying that because I've been in a dream before and it felt like I was alive and I was real, I can't really rule out that I'm not dreaming right now. Like there's nothing I can do to prove that I'm not dreaming.
It would also imply
this very instance could be a dream, because when you're dreaming you don't have like a whole life story. You're always slap bang right in the middle of the situation when you're dreaming. So when I'm dreaming now, I could be dreaming in this situation, and all my memories of my past and of my existence could be entirely fabricated by the dream. So I only think I've had like a long life, and in reality I've only been dreaming for like an hour or two.
But yeah, actually, in dreams there'll be stuff that you, while in the dream, will still not think that makes sense. Like some dreams you have 6 fingers, for example. You'll think that doesn't make sense, but you won't connect that it's not a dream. In reality, like nearly everything is reasonable that you see or anything that happens. So that would also mean that it's less like a dream than before.
I mean, ultimately, if we think about dreams nowadays, we have like hundreds of years of science behind us about your mental state of dreaming and how, like, the science behind dreams. But Descartes' writing here in the early 1600s, he definitely hasn't got the scientific background to know about, like REM sleep and lucid dreaming. He's sort of just going off of what he's experienced, and that I think we all sort of share a common experience that we have dreamed before and thought our dream was real whilst we were in it. And so basically, because of that, he can make you could say it's like a generalization, and that it's not real, and that it's not valid maybe, but he says, you know what, I've had dreams before, they felt like they weren't, or that they were real. Who to say I'm not in a dream right now? And basically, he uses that as a blanket, way to deny reality.
So as in, since there's been one dream, like, at all, that he thought it was like completely real, it could all apply to all of reality.
Yeah. Basically, he tries to take the most stringent and extreme requirements to prove something. So even if it's happened once, he has to assume that it could be happening now.
Yeah, okay.
Like, if I could be wrong one time, I can be wrong every time. He can never know that he's always awake or whatever.
Yeah, the issue is with your senses, at least we have this, we have our experience, but then we have maths or geometry or like definitional truths that we can at least claim some, as like a foundation onto. But with dreaming, now we're not only doubting our senses, but also that maths that we had before, because, well, I could be dreaming about maths being true, not only my senses. So this sort of makes him not doubtful only about senses, but also the maths and geometry or whatever he believed before. But I think that's the second wave done, so I'll pass it to Will for the third wave.
So the third wave is the wave of the evil demon.
Okay.
Now, Descartes, he goes through all these two waves and thinks, I could be doubting all my senses, I could be wrong about everything that I see, hear, touch, taste and smell, and that I could be dreaming. So he thinks that perhaps all his senses and all his experience is being conjured up by an evil demon to deceive him into thinking that he can touch and see and taste. And so this evil demon, right?
Yeah.
The evil demon deceives him into making him think that he can see and hear things and touch things, and so he comes up with his famous phrase, cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am, because he realizes that if this evil demon is deceiving him, then there must be something somewhere for that evil demon to deceive. Now, that this evil demon doesn't necessarily have to be like what we conceive as a demon, like a fallen angel, big red guy with horns. There just has to be some sort of conscious entity which is being deliberately, deceiving.
I mean, and equally that travels through to who I is. So in I think therefore I am, Descartes isn't saying that, he himself, the French philosopher in his cabin in Switzerland, is real. He says that there's just something that he is that's being deceived. So we can't say if it's a soul or it's a human or whatever it is, but he just knows that something is being deceived, and therefore there is something that he is.
His mind exists somewhere. It might be inside his head, or it might be, plugged into the Matrix. But it must exist in some form in order for the evil demon to deceive him. Now, Descartes, he doesn't necessarily believe that there is a literal demon somewhere deceiving him. And in fact, he uses the evil demon to prove the existence of God. Because he knows for an unequivocal fact that he does exist, and also God must exist. It gets very complicated and confusing and circular, but he says that since God is all good, he would not deceive me. An all-loving God wouldn't deceive me into believing that the external world was real. So if God wouldn't deceive me into believing the external world is real, and I have experiences of the external world, it also must be real. Now,
Okay. So he's saying that there's whatever is deceiving him, like to make his senses somewhat not real and his dreams, and this, like life as a dream, aka somewhat not real. Whatever's deceiving him to do that is deceiving him, and whatever it's deceiving means that he is something, as you said. Then is that what you're saying?
I mean, kind of. What you're really saying is that if I am being deceived, it's certainly not by God, because he would never deceive me.
Yeah.
He uses a very fancy argument called the deontological argument to prove that God exists, because God is a perfect, all-loving being, and I can conceive of a perfect, all-loving being in my mind.
Okay.
Obviously, if he's all perfect, being conceived in my mind is, if I can conceive of a perfect being, right, and
Yeah.
he's in my mind, and existence is obviously better than non-existence. So if I can conceive of this perfect being, in order for it to be truly perfect, it must exist. So that's how he gets to God, and because God is the perfect being and also all-loving, he would not allow for me to be deceived.
Yeah.
And therefore, my experiences of the external world must be real.
Okay, so then, this argument slightly nullifies, in a sense, the other two waves of doubt, because if there's a God and since this God is all loving, all everything, it would make sure to not deceive him first of all, and second of all, make sure he is not deceived in the first place, so it proves reality. I guess.
I mean, he gets more onto the existence of God in Meditation 3? I believe it's 3.
Meditations? What is...
Well, his meditations, he sits down at his fireplace, warms his feet up, and he writes down his little books, his meditations. The waves of doubt of today's episode are in his first meditation, and he'll go on to write 5 more and compile it into this handy book I have here, Descartes' Meditations on Philosophy, in which he uses all sorts of the most over-dramatic language. He takes so long.
He was from the 1800s, wasn't he? Or
1600s.
1800s.
Okay, right.
Anyway, let's take it back a bit here. So, the central claim of the third wave is that, okay, I've said that I might doubt my senses, and I can doubt that I'm even, not dreaming right now. But let's say there was an evil demon that was clouding my judgment and giving me all these different thoughts to make me confused. If this was true, I couldn't trust anything that I've ever thought of or experienced or anything at all, basically. But, so, the only thing I can really trust now is, definitional truths. So he says, well, by definition, if the evil demon is deceiving me, then I am something because I have to be deceived. This is a similar argument to the brain in the vat, which is basically, well, I'm not sure that whatever I'm seeing right now is real. People say I'm not just a brain in a vat, and I've been given all these experiences by an external, creator, or a demon, in example, or like a machine.
Or just the Matrix.
Yeah, okay, right.
But basically, as both in the brain in the vat scenario and the evil demon, there is a brain to be deceived, or there is an eye in the cogito. So he basically takes this as proof of something.
No, I don't really know. It's we can discuss his arguments for the existence of God in the later episode, because it is very strange
So, basically, this episode talks about the 3 ways of doubt. Number 1 being that we doubt our senses, so we can't really take what we see to be granted to be true. The second one being doubting that we're even, that this is real, that we're actually dreaming instead, so we can't actually take even the mathematical and geometrical truths. And then the third one being the evil demon. Maybe none of this is true at all. Even the things I'm thinking right now are just fake thoughts that have been implanted into me by an evil demon. But thankfully, Descartes, after all of this, grounds it in cogito ergo sum. I am thinking, therefore I exist. Crucially, it only proves that he's existing as he speaks now, and not that his memory is true or that the future is true. So actually, it paints a bit of a bleak picture that all he can prove as of now is that he exists, or something exists right now. So it's a bit of a solemn ending, to be honest. But obviously, it's not the ending; it's only the second meditation. He then goes on to try to build up his philosophy, being a foundationalist philosopher, tries to prove God's existence, and then goes on to prove the existence of the external world through that. But basically, that was our episode on Descartes' waves of doubt. Thank you for listening, guys.
And hopefully we sound much better in today's episode and not awfully horrible like robots.
Yeah, there you go.
Hopefully this is a lot better.
Okay, thank you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.